Welcome to Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I'll dive into our digital to dollars process. Know your content.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who does his best networking at conferences after 11 p.m., Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek, and you will find me doing my best networking. I guess it's called networking after 11 o'clock at conferences. I do find I have some interesting conversations at conferences, both here in Melbourne, in my hometown, and around the world, late at night. We start to get in the nitty-gritty of how to solve problems in the digital space. Just last week, I was at Paws Fest, where I spoke and moderated a panel on all things esports. So if you want me to either appear at your conference as a speaker or a moderator or a promoter of your conference, please reach out. You can contact me via email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com, or you can reach me via email at Sean Callanan or at Sportsgeek on most platforms. This is going to be episode 2 of our special mini-series diving into the digital to dollars process and how it can work and how it could work for you. Before I jump into that, I just want to have a quick talk about the Patreon campaign. You can support our podcasting efforts and our email newsletter efforts by going to our Patreon campaign, sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. It helps pay for the costs of our podcast editing and getting everything done for each podcast episode, and then the newsletters that get produced. If you find value from podcasts like this or podcasts previously you may have listened to, or you're a regular opener of the Sports Geek news email that comes out on a weekly basis, I'd really appreciate your support. You can do so either as a personal supporter for as little as $4 a month, or if you're a sports tech brand or a sports digital brand that wants to reach sports business executives that listen to this podcast, like yourself, you can do so by becoming a silver or gold supporter. You can find all of the supporters that are at that level in the show notes of every single episode. This is episode 267. If you go to sportsgeekhq.com/267, you will see their details at the bottom of the show notes. Okay, digital to dollars, episode 2. So if you have not listened and you're one of these completists that want to listen to things in order, I suggest you go back to episode 1, where I discussed pillar 1 of the digital dollars process, know your audience. That's episode 264 in your podcast apps. If you want to just go to it on the website, you can go to sportsgeekhq.com/264. So what is the know your content pillar in the digital dollars process? Well, it primarily was developed from content audits, reviews and planning sessions that we've had with digital teams over the years, to really assess what they've been doing from a content point of view over the past 12 months, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and also to understand the team capabilities and where the resourcing of a digital team is. One of the key things we find from diving into the content piece is a lot of digital teams are producing a lot of content that a lot of people inside the organization don't know exists. So we try to solve that problem by making sure everyone realizes how much work and how much content is being produced, because it's a lot of that unknown content that is actually quite valuable. So who should attend this type of workshop and these types of sessions? Well, obviously content and editorial, your digital team, the people who are the creators, your digital soldiers, so if you will. It's obviously right in their wheelhouse. It's, hey, what should we do? How should we do it? Why are we doing it? That kind of thing. And that's where primarily they get the most benefit from it. But the other people that I like having attend this, or at least have representation in these kinds of workshops, are sponsorship and commercial folk, because they bring a commercial lens to what you're doing in the content space. They can start seeing what sponsors might be best fits for content, and what might be attractive to a sponsor. And remembering that they are out there making promises to sponsors. So it's really good to actually get them into this conversation, because then they can start making promises of things you're already producing and not adding to the workload, which sometimes happens. The other people that I would like to attend are the people from the previous workshop in the audience space. So people who have really that value the audience and your fan base. So whether that be your membership season ticket sales people and your data ticketing people. So they're having a real narrow lens on the different audiences you want to target and want to engage because you want to move them along the sales funnel. It's great having those people with that data audience focus because what we do find out of these reviews is gaps where we find out that there are audiences that are not being served enough. So they're the people we want to be attending a Know Your Content workshop and the work we do around it. So why are we doing it? Other than testing, should we keep doing this piece of content, which is a valuable piece? It's really just starting to give both your digital team and your editorial team some structure around how they would go about producing content and producing new content. So one of the really useful pieces is that, like I said, that unknown content and unnamed content. So I live the mottos that I talk about. So steal with pride is one of the phrases that I use that I stole from someone. And one of the things that I have stolen is the term content strands. Jane Busman-Wise, a good friend of mine, talked about that on episode 146. If you go to sportsgeekhq.com/146, you'll hear Jane talk about that in her work with the Red Bulls and other New York teams that she's worked with. So really that is just giving everything you're producing a name. And understanding that every piece of content potentially becomes a series. And so you can say, this content strand. And it's much easier than talking about a piece of content or a content series when it has a name rather than something generic of, that's the thing we do on a Thursday. They can be internal names. It doesn't mean you have to brand the piece of content with that kind of thing, but it needs to be a name that it can be used to circulate that piece of content internally and potentially to sponsors. So that's a real important thing. A lot of times when we go through this process, we find content in the gaps, especially on social platforms that, where we're doing content specifically for that social platform, that they realize, that actually is a regular series. That pre-game shot we always do, or that shot we always do about a player, should just be given a name. Then something that sort of evolves as we're going through. Effectively, the way we normally do it is go through a week. What happens on a Monday? What happens on a Tuesday? What happens on a Thursday? What's the 2 days before a game day? What's the 2 days after a game day? Sort of work out what a regular season content plan looks like. And we start defining what the different content pillars they can be assigned to. You can do it either up front, say, hey, here's our content pillars and make sure they're addressed, or you can do it as a byproduct of looking at all your content. In the sports space, there's obviously game day and producing content around game day and producing content around your sport. And then there's other pillars like community, fans, those kind of things. So you start defining them and starting assigning them to all the different content strands. Again, it's important to see, hey, what is our mix? How much content are we producing for each pillar? And then the last piece is which audience is the primary audience for your content? Yes, most of your content is for all fans, but is there a specific primary audience that is the one that's going to be the most engaging, driving most traffic? Those kind of things. And again, this is the piece that really interests the membership ticketing people in that it can find that gap of you are not talking to that audience segment enough. It doesn't mean completely change your plans. It just means, well, hang on, we need to produce content for those people, and having that focus of just producing content for that specific segment really completely changes the piece of content. So it could be that you change a piece of content and you just change the focus for the audience, or you create a new piece of content that fits for that audience, that kind of thing. Because what we do find, and I've spoken about it a little bit before, the digital cheer squad, the David Puddies, the digital face painters, they're the most active. They're the ones that love everything you do, and it's very easy to lean into that and to continue chase down, your digital cheer squad. But sometimes you need to engage a different segment of your fan base. They might not be as engaged. They might not produce as many comments and tweets and posts and likes, but it's really important for other means. And so the objective might be memberships, season ticket holders, making sure they're engaged. It might be a new segment you're trying to attract, and it actually is priming, again, the funnel for those types of transactions, whether it be getting them signed up for a membership, getting them signed up for an OTT service that you're offering, those kind of things. I think a lot of the times, or initially when we do the first run, we'll have a lot of content listed. It'll be for your primary digital cheer squad that's the most active, and it'll be for your content pillar around your game and players. And so that's 90% or so of most content plans. But it's like, well, how can we give it a bit more diversity? So that's pretty much sort of the rundown of, hey, how much content do you produce? Then when we look at doing that content audit and understanding, did it work? And we rate them on three things: traffic, fans, and commercial. So traffic means, did it reach the objective we want? Did it get lots of views? Did it get lots of clicks? Did it get lots of dwell time? Those kind of things. Then we look at it from a fan's point of view. Did the fans like it? Did they talk about it? Did they engage with it? Would they complain if you took it out of the rotation? And then, is there a commercial outcome from this? Do we have a partner with it? Is the partner happy? Is it driving the actions we want? So when we're looking at, defining these content strands, rather than just saying, hey, we're producing this piece of content, we're looking at designing the piece of content for a specific audience, for particular actions, and then also starting to have that commercial lens of who it might be for. So the thing that we are always looking for in this module is it's a deep dive on all the content that you're producing, but it's understanding who is it for, is it exactly working, right? And again, if you do the scores of no traffic, fans don't like it, we don't really get much returns from a commercial point of view, you really want to be looking at why are you producing that piece of content. So should we be producing it? And then also you get a better representation if you're also going through that content audit and saying these are the people that are assigned to it, or these are the resources that are applied to it. And you can start seeing, we are at max capacity with video, or we are at max capacity with our graphics department. But you can at least say and go back to your C-level and higher ups to say, well, this is how many pieces of content we've produced over the past 12 months. And it really highlights why, you've got an overworked team. And again, feeds into later pieces of the digital to dollars process to say, hey, what is the cost of producing this? If the sponsor's getting involved, how are they contributing to that piece? So again, I'm flying through the steps because this is not, I guess, the workshop in itself, but this is a bit of an outline of the workshop and how we dive into the weeds for a content point of view. So I guess a couple of different ways that the Know Your Content workshop and content can work. So there's either the workshop, which would be step 2 of the digital to dollars process. Step 1 being know your audience, where you've dove in and looked at some of the different audiences that you've got. This is effectively the content audit. Work with you and your team to review every single piece of content that you've potentially done or you plan to do. So you can use this as a review tool and or a planning tool. So when you're in that planning mode of, if you've named something that hasn't been named, well, that effectively is new. It's definitely new to the commercial folk. A lot of the times when we find that new, and I'm using inverted quotes here, you can't see air quotes when on a podcast, but just trust me, I did it. They can then take that piece of content that hasn't been named, it's been really engaged by the fans and they love it, they can take it to a partner straight away. And then the other piece is, what is the other content that can be developed off the content that you're producing? So how can we extend, I guess, the content that we're producing at a low resource cost? So this very much applies to teams that are stretched, which, is every team. But also, how do we get more content out of the content that we're producing? So if we've got a great 2-minute video, what does it look like if it gets cut down? Is it into multiple 15-second videos or different kinds of things? How can it be reframed a few different ways? So that's a half day workshop on site, and then the follow up work, because you can't do the whole content audit in that half day, is to follow through and do some work going backwards and forwards, reviewing the content audit and everything that's done, and naming things and those kind of pieces. So that's the Know Your Content workshop, and I sort of present findings and some of the things there. The other piece that's a big part of the Know Your Content workshop is a little bit of brainstorming around what does a real big content idea look like, and if you were to come up with that idea, how would you do it? How would you resource it? Can it be done completely internally? Would you engage other people? But having that conversation with smart digital folk in the room, the data folk that understand potentially what the outcomes of something really cool and a really big idea, but then also get the juices flowing for the commercial folk. So if you can come up with a big idea that everyone feels like you can execute on, either with internal or potentially bring in external resources, it'll be up to your commercial team to sell it. So just getting that conversation going is worthwhile enough to say, hey, we want to do that podcast series we've never done, or we want to do that longer form video series we keep saying we want to do, or we want to do that documentary, those kind of things, those things that you say, oh, we don't have the time, the budget to do. Let's start opening that discussion, because there are brands and sponsors that do want to do that type of content. And if you're not pitching that type of content, you can't do it. So it's again starting to get that conversation going to sort of prime the pump for the pieces down the path of know your pitch. So helping the content team to know how they can build something that the commercial team can pitch is really valuable. So that's the Know Your Content workshop. It works really well from a point of view of either you want to review what you're doing in a content point of view or plan the season ahead. It can be done in a pure online mode, Q&A sessions, where you identify some key content pillars and then follow up defining some strands and sort of helping your team get an understanding of how they would go about developing content. So it's less about, hey, let's review everything, and it's more in that brainstorming, how you develop content and how you would build out the content to tell the story. Potentially, and then the last one is a Know Your Content keynote or a webinar. So, ideal for a league or wanting a league that wants to help teams get better, understanding how to maximize content efforts. So similar to what we're currently doing with Football West, where we're taking some of the best pieces of digital to dollars and throwing them into a webinar series to help clubs better understand what they could do from a content point of view. So there's a few different options in that space, whether it's just, hey, we want some help with our content and reviewing of our content, or a brainstorming of what we can do. But I do like to actually pull it back to that structure of the why are we doing it? What are the actions we want from our fans around that content is really critical. So you don't just get caught up in the content and editorial bubble to a certain degree, and sort of look at what are the wider pieces that are available. So that gives you a little bit of an understanding of, and hopefully some tips that you can go and use now. I know I've had a few people reach out after the Know Your Audience podcast. I am contemplating running a public workshop, effectively a version of what I'm doing with Football West. So if you're interested in that type of thing, please reach out to me. At least put your hand up. Partly it'll be run if there is interest. But what I'm considering is doing a 5-session online webinar style course that sort of takes people through it, and that will be really effective for that grassroots level. If you're running a local baseball or cricket team or a football team or a basketball team and that kind of thing, and you want to see, the digital footprint of your club grow, that's who it'll be for. So that's it. And as always, you can reach me, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com via email, and you get more info at digitaldollars.com. That'll give you more info on this process. As I said earlier, you can find the first episode in this series, Know Your Audience, back at sportsgeekhq.com/264. And if you've got any other questions on the digital dollars process, you can always reach out to me and ask them, or you can ask questions for the Q&A episodes of the Sports Geek podcast by simply going to sportsgeekhq.com/questions. So that's it for this episode. Hopefully I've given you some insights into, I guess, how we go through reviewing content, setting up a content strategy, understanding the reasons why you want to name content. And I would suggest you go back and listen to that episode with Jane, episode 146. But yeah, it's really critical for me. It's really critical to you can get in the I guess on the treadmill of just producing content for content's sake and not quite understanding the actions and the intention you're trying to get from your fans. One of the biggest outcomes of this workshop is better connection between your digital team and your commercial team. Like once they start understanding, one, what you're producing, they have a better understanding of how they can help sponsors, but then vice versa. If you can start building out, here's a content piece we want to build, but knowing how to pitch that back to a partner is really important. It's a really valuable commercial skill for your digital team. I think the digital teams that are really thriving at the minute are the ones that do have that commercial focus rather than just the pure content digital piece. So that's something that I'm always focused on and focused on helping digital teams become more commercially savvy. And then the vice versa of that is helping commercial teams becoming more digital savvy. Until next week, where I'll have another Sports Geek podcast guest. Remember, you can go back to check out any of the previous 260-something episodes with guests around the world. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com, or you can check it out on all your favourite podcasting platforms. Remember, if you would like to support what we do in the podcasting and newsletter space, you could do so on our Patreon campaign, sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join Sports Geek Nation access to exclusive Slack and Facebook groups with regular Q&A sessions with Sean Callanan. Go to sportsgeeknation.com to join. Need help with your digital rate card? Not sure how to price your assets? Is there a disconnect between digital and commercial? That is where Sean works best, in digital divorce counselor mode. Book a time for a call with Sean to discuss the Sports Geek process. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.
Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources.